had always been the type to push boundaries. As aboard the research vessel Prometheus, he'd made first contact with 17 different alien species in the past decade. Each encounter had taught him something new about life in the universe, but nothing had prepared him for what he discovered on 442b. The planet hung in space like a blue-green jewel, its twin suns casting strange shadows across continents that shifted and moved like living things. The atmospheric readings were perfect for human life, almost suspiciously so. When the landing party touched down in what appeared to be a vast crystalline forest, felt the familiar thrill of discovery coursing through his veins. "Stay close to the shuttle," Captain's voice crackled through the comm. "We don't know what's out there." But was already walking toward the nearest crystal formation, his scanner beeping frantically. The structures weren't crystals at all, he realized. They were some kind of organic material that had hardened over time, forming geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. As he approached, the surface began to shimmer and change, revealing chambers filled with a luminescent blue liquid. "Doctor, step back immediately," came another voice through his earpiece. Dr. Sarah, the team's biochemist, sounded genuinely frightened. "My readings are showing massive biological activity from those structures. Whatever's in there, it's not natural." Ignored her warning, mesmerized by the swirling patterns in the liquid. It moved with purpose, forming symbols and shapes that seemed almost like language. As he pressed his gloved hand against the smooth surface, the chamber began to glow brighter. The surface dissolved under his touch like water, and a voice filled his mind. Not heard through his ears, but spoken directly into his consciousness. The words came in perfect English, though he knew instinctively that the being speaking to him had never learned human language. "Welcome, seeker of knowledge." Stumbled backward, his heart racing. What are you?" "I am what your people would call ancient. I have watched the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations across this galaxy. You humans interest me greatly." The blue liquid began to take shape, forming a humanoid figure that stepped gracefully from the chamber. It was tall and elegant, with features that seemed to shift between familiar and alien. When it smiled, felt both comforted and terrified. "My team," managed to say, "they're looking for me. They cannot see me unless I allow it. You alone have the sensitivity to perceive my true form. This is why I chose to reveal myself to you." The use of his name sent chills down spine. "How do you know who I am?" "I know many things. I know that you have dedicated your life to understanding the cosmos and the creatures that inhabit it. I know that you have always felt different from your fellow humans, as if you were meant for something greater." It was true, though had never admitted it to anyone. Since childhood, he'd felt like an outsider looking in, fascinated by the unknown while others were content with the familiar. "I can offer you something beyond your wildest dreams," the being continued. "Knowledge of the universe that would take your species to discover on their own. Understanding of forces and phenomena that would elevate humanity to heights unimaginable." "What's the catch?" asked, though he found himself leaning forward despite his caution. The being gestured to the chamber it had emerged from, and the blue liquid began to swirl again, forming new patterns. "There is always a price for transcendence. If you drink of this essence, you will gain abilities beyond human comprehension. You will see the universe as it truly is, understand the connections between all living things. But you will no longer be human. Your DNA will change at the fundamental level. You will become something new, something greater, but the humanity you have known will be lost forever." Stared at the liquid, hypnotized by its beauty. "What would I become?" "A bridge between worlds. A being capable of existing in dimensions your current form cannot even perceive. You would retain your memories, your personality, but your capabilities would be expanded beyond current human limitations." Dr. Sarah's voice echoed through the crystalline forest. "Where are you?" The being raised a hand, and suddenly could see his colleagues searching frantically in the distance, moving in slow motion as if trapped in amber. "Time moves differently for me," it explained. "You have as long as you need to decide. But know this, the offer is made only once, and only to those rare individuals who have the potential to transcend their origins." Felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought of all the mysteries that had driven him since childhood, all the questions about existence and consciousness that kept him awake at night. Here was a chance to have those answers, to become something more than human limitations would allow. "Show me," he said quietly. Show me what I would become. The being smiled and touched his forehead. Suddenly, his consciousness exploded outward. He could see the entire galaxy spread out before him like a vast web of light and energy. Every star was connected to every other star through invisible threads of force. Every planet pulsed with life, even those that appeared barren to human observation. He saw civilizations that had transcended physical form, existing as pure energy and thought. He witnessed the birth and death of species across millions of years, each adding their unique perspective to the cosmic symphony. And underlying it all was a pattern, a design so beautiful and complex that it brought tears to his eyes. When the vision ended, was on his knees, gasping for breath. The being stood over him, patient and understanding. Now you have seen a fraction of what awaits, it said. But remember, once the change begins, there is no going back. You will outlive your species, watch humanity evolve or perish from a perspective they cannot share. You will be alone in ways you cannot imagine. Looked up at the creature, then back at the chamber of blue liquid. In the distance, he could see his teammates still searching, their movements gradually returning to normal speed. If I don't do this, said, will you offer it to someone else? Perhaps, perhaps not. The choice must come from within. It cannot be forced or coerced. Stood on shaking legs, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. The rational part of him screamed warnings about unknown alien substances and the dangers of trusting an entity he'd just met. But the deeper part of him, the part that had always yearned for more than human existence could offer, was already reaching toward the chamber. My colleagues, he said, what happens to them? They will remember finding you unconscious near these formations. You will have suffered a minor allergic reaction to alien spores, nothing more. They will take you back to your ship, and life will continue as it always has. And if I drink, you will appear to die. Your human form will cease to function as they understand it. But you will emerge transformed, able to reveal yourself to them or not as you choose. The decision of how to proceed will be yours. Closed his eyes and thought of his sister back on Earth, of his parents who had always worried about his dangerous career. He thought of Sarah and the rest of the team, of Captain who had become like a father to him. Would he be abandoning them, or would he be positioning himself to help humanity in ways they couldn't imagine? The blue liquid pulsed gently in its chamber, waiting for his decision. Opened his eyes and met the being's gaze. If I do this, he said, I want your promise that I'll be able to protect humanity when they need it, that this power won't be wasted on philosophical contemplation while my people suffer. You would use transcendence in service of your origin species. The being seemed genuinely surprised. Most who make this choice leave their past behind entirely. Then most who make this choice weren't human, replied firmly. We don't abandon our own. The being's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. Perhaps this is why your species interests me so greatly. Very well. I give you my word that your new abilities will enable you to protect humanity in ways your current form never could. Nodded and walked toward the chamber. The blue liquid seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat as he approached. He could feel its power calling to him, promising knowledge and capabilities beyond his wildest dreams. Doctor, Sarah's voice was getting closer. We found some kind of energy signature. Are you okay? Time was running out. Looked back at the being one last time. Choose quickly, it urged. Your colleagues approach. Cupped his hands and dipped them into the blue liquid. It was warm against his skin, alive with potential. He could feel it trying to merge with his DNA even through his gloves. If you drink this, you'll never be human again, the being warned one final time, its voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. Brought the liquid to his lips, hesitated for just a moment as he thought of everything he was about to lose, everything he was about to gain. Then he drank deeply, feeling the alien essence burn down his throat like liquid starlight. The transformation began immediately. His human DNA started rewriting itself cell by cell, each change sending waves of agony and ecstasy through his body. He could feel his consciousness expanding, touching dimensions he'd never known existed. The universe revealed itself layer by layer, like an infinite onion being peeled back to reveal its cosmic secrets. But as his awareness grew, he also felt his human memories and emotions being preserved, locked away in a part of his new consciousness that would always remain fundamentally him. The being had kept its promise. He was becoming something greater while remaining essentially. Over here, Sarah's voice cut through his transformation. I found him. Collapsed to the ground, his body convulsing as the final stages of change took hold. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the being watching him with something that might have been pride, or perhaps regret. When his teammates found him moments later, appeared to be suffering from severe anaphylactic shock. Sarah immediately administered emergency treatment, while Captain called for an immediate evacuation to the ship's medical bay. None of them noticed the faint blue glow that flickered behind closed eyelids, or the way the crystal formations around them dimmed as if their power source had been drained. The ancient being was nowhere to be seen, dissolved back into the planetary consciousness from which it had emerged. As the shuttle raced back toward the Prometheus, his body fought between life and death, between humanity and something far greater. Deep in his transforming mind, he held onto one central truth that would guide him through whatever was to come. He had chosen to transcend humanity, not to leave it behind, but to better serve it. Whatever he became, whatever powers he gained, he would use them to protect the species that had given him life. This promise would become his anchor in the storm of transformation that was only just beginning. The real test would come when he awakened to discover what he had truly become. Drifted back to consciousness like a diver rising from the deepest ocean trenches. At first, he wasn't sure if he was alive or dead. His body felt different, not just sick or injured, but fundamentally altered in ways he couldn't immediately comprehend. When he finally opened his eyes, the medical bay of the Prometheus looked completely different. He could see the electromagnetic fields generated by the equipment, watch the flow of electrons through the circuitry, and perceive the quantum fluctuations in the air itself. It was beautiful and overwhelming. Sarah's voice made him turn his head, and he was startled to see her life force glowing around her like a golden aura. "Thank God you're awake. We thought we'd lost you for a while there." Dr. Martinez, the ship's chief medical officer, approached with a scanner in hand. "Your vital signs were completely erratic for 3 days. We've never seen anything like it. How do you feel?" Tried to speak and found his voice had changed subtly. It carried harmonics that hadn't been there before, frequencies that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. "Different," he managed to say, then cleared his throat and tried again. "I feel different." "That's understandable after such a severe allergic reaction," Dr. Martinez said, running his scanner over his body. "The samples you collected showed high concentrations of psychoactive compounds. You're lucky to be alive." Sat up slowly, marveling at how his enhanced senses were processing everything around him. He could hear conversations happening 3 decks away, feel the gravitational pull of nearby stellar objects, and sense the emotional states of everyone in the medical bay. The overwhelming flood of information should have driven him insane, but somehow his transformed mind was processing it all effortlessly. "I need to get back to work," he said, swinging his legs over the side of the medical bed. "Absolutely not," Dr. Martinez replied firmly. "You're staying under observation for at least another 24 hours. Whatever you were exposed to down there caused significant changes to your brain chemistry. I want to run more tests." Looked at the doctor's scanner readings over his shoulder, something he shouldn't have been able to do from his position. The device showed his cellular structure as completely normal, human in every detectable way. The being had been thorough in concealing the changes. "I'm fine, really," insisted, and he meant it. He had never felt better in his life, every fiber of his being thrummed with energy and potential. Just hungry and tired. Sarah approached his bedside, her concern radiating off her in waves that could perceive as clearly as if she'd spoken aloud. "We were so worried about you. When we found you, you weren't breathing for almost 3 minutes. Captain performed CPR while I prepped the adrenaline shot." Felt a surge of gratitude toward his teammates, followed immediately by the weight of his deception. They had risked their own safety to save him, and he couldn't tell them that their efforts had been unnecessary, that his body had been busy dying to one form of life and being born into another. "Thank you," he said quietly, "all of you." Over the next several hours, submitted to a battery of tests while struggling to control his new abilities. When Dr. Martinez shined a light in his eyes, could see the individual photons and trace their quantum properties. When they drew blood, he could feel each cell being harvested and knew instantly that the alien transformation had occurred at such a deep level that their equipment couldn't detect it. The hardest part was pretending to be normal, Every instinct screamed at him to reveal what he had become, to share the incredible knowledge flooding through his consciousness. He could see solutions to engineering problems that had plagued the ship for months, understand the true nature of the quantum drive that powered their faster-than-light travel, and perceive gravitational anomalies that their sensors couldn't detect. But he also remembered the being's warning about isolation. If he revealed his transformation now, would his colleagues accept him? Would they even believe him? Or would they lock him in a containment cell and study him like a lab specimen? "All your tests are coming back normal," Dr. Martinez announced after reviewing the final batch of results. "Whatever happened to you down there, your body seems to have recovered completely." "Can I return to my quarters?" asked. "I suppose, but I want you to report any unusual symptoms immediately. Headaches, nausea, vision changes, anything at all." Nodded and made his way back to his cabin, careful to walk at normal human speed despite feeling like he could move through the ship's corridors like liquid light. Once safely behind closed doors, he allowed himself to truly experience his new nature for the first time. He extended his consciousness outward and felt the ship around him like an extension of his own body. He could sense every crew member, feel the pulse of the engines, and perceive the vast emptiness of space beyond their hull. But it wasn't empty at all. Space teemed with energy fields, particle streams, and dimensional fluctuations that painted an incredibly complex picture of the universe. A soft chime at his door interrupted his exploration. "Come in," he called, quickly pulling his awareness back to normal human parameters. Captain entered, his weathered face showing relief mixed with concern. "Good to see you up and about, son. You gave us quite a scare." "I'm sorry about that, Captain. I should have been more careful with the initial survey." Sat in the chair across from his desk, studying him carefully. "Something's different about you," he said after a moment. "I can't put my finger on it, but you seem, I don't know, more focused somehow." Felt a moment of panic. If the captain could sense changes, how long before others noticed? "I think having a close call like that puts things in perspective," he said carefully. "Maybe," didn't look convinced. "Listen, I've been in space for 37 years. I've seen things that would make most people question their sanity. If something happened down there, something beyond a simple allergic reaction, you can tell me." The offer was tempting. Had always been a father figure too, someone he trusted implicitly. But the weight of the transformation and its implications felt too massive to share with anyone who couldn't understand the full scope of what was happening. "Nothing happened, Captain. I was careless and paid the price, that's all." Nodded slowly but could sense his continued skepticism. "All right, but if you need to talk about anything, and I mean anything, my door is always open." After the captain left, sat in meditation, trying to make sense of his new existence. The being had been right about the isolation. He was still on the surface, but underneath, he had become something that his fellow humans couldn't relate to or understand. His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent alarm klaxon echoing through the ship. His enhanced hearing immediately identified the specific pattern: hull breach in Section 7, near the engineering department. But more than that, he could sense the catastrophic failure developing in real time, feel the stress fractures spreading through the ship's superstructure. Rushed to his door, then stopped. If he responded too quickly with knowledge he shouldn't possess, it would raise questions. But if he didn't act, people would die. He made his choice and sprinted through the corridors at superhuman speed, no longer caring about maintaining his cover. He reached Section 7 before the emergency response teams and found the breach spreading faster than the ship's automated systems could compensate. Without thinking, pressed his hands against the damaged hull. His transformed consciousness reached into the metal's molecular structure, strengthening the atomic bonds and sealing the fractures at a fundamental level. The breach stopped expanding and began to close as if the metal were healing itself. "How the hell did you do that?" Spun around to find Chief Engineer Williams staring at him in shock. The man had arrived just in time to see the impossible repair completing itself. "I started to say, then realized that any explanation would sound insane." Williams approached the sealed breach, running his hands over metal that now showed no sign of damage. "This hull was compromised down to the molecular level. Our repair system said it would take 6 hours to fix properly. But this is like it never happened." More crew members arrived, including Captain and Dr. Martinez. They all stared at the pristine hull section while Williams struggled to explain what he'd witnessed. "Doctor was here when I arrived," Williams said slowly. "He was touching the breach and the metal just fixed itself." All eyes turned to, who felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. This was the moment he had dreaded and anticipated, the end of his masquerade as merely human. Captain said quietly, "I think it's time you told us what really happened on that planet." Looked around at the faces of his colleagues, people he had worked with for years, shared dangers and discoveries with, come to love like family. They deserved the truth, but would they accept it? "You won't believe me," he said finally. "Try us," Sarah said, moving to stand beside the captain. "We've seen enough impossible things in our time out here to keep an open mind." Took a deep breath and began to speak. He told them about the crystal formations, about the ancient being, about the choice he had been offered and the decision he had made. He explained the transformation, the expansion of his consciousness, and the abilities he was still learning to control. When he finished, the corridor was silent except for the hum of the ship's life support systems. "Prove it," Williams said bluntly. "If you're really some kind of enhanced human, show us." Nodded and extended his awareness toward the ship's quantum drive, 3 decks below them. With a thought, he optimized the particle flow and increased efficiency by 12%. The change in the engine's harmonics was subtle but immediate. "The drive," Williams breathed, checking his handheld monitor. "You just improved our efficiency without touching anything." "That's impossible," Dr. Martinez protested. "No human can interface with technology at that level." "I'm not entirely human anymore," said simply. "But I'm still me. I'm still your colleague and friend. I just see more now, understand more." Captain stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "This being you met, did it say why it chose you?" "Because I was sensitive to its presence, and because it wanted to see what humanity would do with transcendence." "What did you tell it about humanity?" Smiled, remembering his conversation with the ancient entity. "I told it that humans don't abandon their own, that any power I gained would be used to protect my people." "And you meant that?" "It's the only reason I'm still here, instead of exploring distant galaxies. I chose to become something more so I could better serve humanity's interests." Sarah stepped closer, her expression mixing wonder and concern. "What does this mean for you, for us?" "It means I'm better equipped to handle the dangers we face out here. I can see threats before they manifest, repair damage that would normally be catastrophic, and understand alien technologies in ways that could benefit everyone." "But you're also no longer one of us," Dr. Martinez pointed out. "You're something else wearing space." The words stung but nodded. "In some ways, yes, I won't age the same way you will. I'll outlive everyone I care about. I'll see the universe in ways you can't share. But my loyalty to humanity, to this crew, to our mission, that hasn't changed. If anything, it's stronger now." Captain was quiet for a long moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "Can you help us get home faster? We've been out here for 2 years, and the crew is getting homesick." Smiled and extended his consciousness toward the navigation systems. He could see their position in space with perfect clarity, trace the quantum currents that would carry them home in half the time their computers predicted. "I can do better than that," he said. "I can get us home safely." As he began to demonstrate his new abilities to his amazed colleagues, felt the isolation he'd feared beginning to fade. Perhaps being different didn't have to mean being alone. Perhaps his transformation was just the beginning of something greater for all of them. But deep in space, other entities had sensed the birth of a new form of consciousness. Ancient powers that had been sleeping began to stir, drawn by the resonance of transcended humanity. His choice to remain loyal to his species had created ripples across the galaxy. The real test was yet to come. 3 weeks passed since had revealed his transformation to the crew of the Prometheus. The ship hummed with new efficiency as he optimized their systems, but the real changes were more subtle. The crew had begun to see their universe through his eyes, understanding phenomena that had previously been beyond human comprehension. Stood in the observation deck, watching the stars wheel past as they traveled through a region of space that shouldn't have been navigable. His enhanced senses allowed him to see the gravitational currents and quantum tunnels that made their passage possible. But explaining it to his human colleagues required simplifying concepts that existed beyond their dimensional understanding. Captain's voice came through the comm system. "We're getting some unusual readings from long-range sensors. Could you take a look?" Made his way to the bridge, where the senior staff had gathered around the main display. The sensor data showed massive gravitational anomalies approaching their position, moving with purpose rather than following natural stellar mechanics. "It's not a natural phenomenon," Sarah said, her voice tight with concern. "Something is coming toward us, and it's bigger than anything we've ever encountered." Extended his consciousness toward the anomalies and felt a chill run through his transformed awareness. The approaching objects weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were manifestations of pure will made tangible, beings so ancient and powerful that reality bent around them. "We need to change course immediately," he said, his voice carrying harmonics of urgency that made everyone on the bridge feel the danger at a primal level. "What is it?" Williams asked from his engineering station. Closed his eyes and reached deeper into space with his enhanced perception. What he found made his blood run cold. "They're called the Devourers," he said slowly, accessing knowledge that the transformation had unlocked in his mind. "Ancient entities that feed on consciousness itself. They've been dormant for millions of years." "What woke them up?" asked. Met his captain's eyes with grim understanding. "I did. My transformation sent out ripples across dimensional space. They sensed a new form of consciousness being born and came to investigate." "Can we outrun them?" Sarah asked. "Not in conventional space, but there are other options." Moved to the navigation console and began inputting coordinates that existed in dimensions the ship's computers couldn't normally access. "I can guide us through folded space, but it's dangerous. One miscalculation and we could end up scattered across several realities." "Better than being consumed by cosmic parasites," said grimly. "Do it." Placed his hands on the navigation controls and felt his consciousness merge with the ship's quantum drive. The universe around them twisted and folded as he pulled the Prometheus into a space between dimensions, a gray realm where the normal laws of physics held only tentative sway. The transition was jarring for the human crew. Several people became nauseous as their inner ears struggled to cope with gravitational fields that pointed in directions that didn't exist in normal space. But they were alive and temporarily safe. "How long can we stay here?" Dr. Martinez asked, steadying himself against a console. "Not long," replied, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort of maintaining their position. "This realm isn't meant for matter as we understand it. The ship's hull is already beginning to destabilize at the quantum level." Through the viewports, they could see the twisted landscape of folded space, colors that had no names, geometries that hurt to look at directly, and in the distance, the dark shadows of the Devourers searching for their prey. "There," Williams pointed to the sensor display. "Something's coming through the fold." A new presence entered the gray realm, moving with the fluid grace of something born to exist between dimensions. As it approached, felt a familiar resonance. The ancient being from 442B had followed them. The entity materialized on the bridge without triggering any security alarms, its form shifting between the crystalline appearance remembered and something more suited to the current environment. The crew tensed, but raised a calming hand. "You came," said. "I told you that your choice would have consequences," the being replied, its mental voice reaching everyone on the bridge simultaneously. "The Devourers have awakened because they sense a potential threat to their dominance. You are that threat." "What do they want?" asked, his military training helping him maintain composure despite the impossible situation. "To consume the consciousness that has transcended its original form. But more than that, they fear what you represent, the possibility that an entire species might evolve beyond their ability to feed upon." "Humanity," Sarah breathed. "They're afraid of what we might become." "Precisely. Your species has a unique trait among the intelligent races I have observed. You adapt, you overcome, and you never abandon your own. This makes you dangerous to entities that rely on isolated, vulnerable consciousness for sustenance." Felt pieces of a vast cosmic puzzle clicking into place. "The transformation wasn't just about giving me power. You were creating a prototype, testing whether humanity could handle transcendence while retaining our essential nature." "Indeed, and now we know the answer. But knowledge without action is meaningless. The Devourers will not stop hunting you." They will track you across the galaxy, and when they find Earth, they will consume your entire species to prevent the spread of transcendent humanity. The weight of this revelation settled over the bridge crew like a crushing gravitational field. Had sought knowledge and power, but his choice had potentially doomed his entire species. "There has to be a way to stop them," he said. "There is, but it requires sacrifice from your people, and trust in abilities they do not yet possess." Captain stepped forward, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were discussing. "What do you need us to do?" The ancient beings' form shimmered, and suddenly they were all seeing images directly in their minds, visions of humanity's possible futures. In one timeline, Earth was a dead world, its population consumed by the Devourers. In another, humans had spread across the galaxy as transcendent beings, shepherding younger species and protecting the cosmos from ancient threats. Must return to Earth and begin the process of preparing select humans for transformation. Not everyone will be able to make the transition. The process requires a specific type of consciousness, one that exists in perhaps 1 in a million of your people. But those who can transcend will become guardians, protectors of humanity and other species threatened by the Devourers. "How long do we have?" asked. The Devourers move slowly but inexorably. Perhaps 6 of your months before they reach Earth's solar system. Enough time to begin the process, but not enough to save everyone. "We save who we can," said firmly, "and we find a way to protect the rest." "There is one other option," the being continued. "If enough humans undergo the transformation, if you can create a network of transcendent consciousness, you might be able to shield your entire world. The Devourers cannot feed on awareness that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Felt hope stirring in his chest, a psychic barrier around Earth. More than that, a fundamental shift in how human consciousness interacts with reality. Your species would become something new while remaining essentially human. It is unprecedented, but your people have a gift for achieving the impossible. Sarah looked around at her colleagues, seeing the determination forming on their faces. "How do we start?" "Return to your world. Identify those with the sensitivity possessed before his transformation. Begin preparing them for the choice he made, and pray that humanity's greatest strength, its refusal to abandon its own, proves stronger than the Devourer's hunger." The being began to fade, but not before offering one final piece of guidance. "Remember, the transformation is not about becoming more than human. It is about becoming the best possible version of what humanity can be." As the entity disappeared, felt the ship beginning to destabilize in the folded space. He guided them back into normal reality, emerging far from the Devourers but still within their sphere of influence. "Set course for Earth," ordered. "Maximum speed." "Captain," said quietly, "I need you to understand what we're asking people to do. The transformation isn't reversible. Those who undergo it will gain incredible abilities, but they'll also outlive everyone they currently love. They'll see their friends and family age and die while they remain unchanged. It's a form of immortality, but it comes with a terrible cost. And if they don't do it, everyone dies anyway." Nodded grimly. "Then we give them the choice. That's what humans do. We choose our own fate, even when all the options are terrible." As the Prometheus raced toward Earth, began planning how to identify and approach potential candidates for transformation. The ancient being had been right about humanity's unique nature. They would face this crisis together, supporting each other through whatever came next. But in the back of his mind, wondered if they were strong enough to save their world. The Devourers had consumed countless civilizations across the galaxy. What made humanity different enough to succeed where others had failed? The answer, he realized, was exactly what he had told the ancient being on 442b. Humans don't abandon their own. Even transcendence couldn't change that fundamental truth about his species. It was time to find out if that would be enough to save them all. Behind them in the depths of space, the Devourers continued their inexorable advance toward Earth. Ancient, patient, and hungry, they moved with the confidence of entities that had never known defeat, but they had never encountered humanity before. They were about to learn why the universe's most dangerous species was also its most hopeful. The real battle was just beginning, and no longer entirely human but still essentially himself would lead his people in their greatest challenge yet. The transformation had been just the first step in humanity's evolution. The next step would determine whether they had a future at all. The Prometheus emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system like a harbinger bearing impossible news. Stood on the bridge, his enhanced senses drinking in the familiar gravitational signature of his, while his transformed consciousness wrestled with the magnitude of what lay ahead. "There she is," Captain said softly, looking at the blue-white marble that had given birth to all of them. "Looks peaceful from here." Could see beyond the peaceful facade. His evolved awareness detected the electromagnetic signatures of 11 billion human minds, each one a potential candidate for transformation or a future victim of the Devourers. The weight of choosing who lived and who died in their current form pressed down on him like the gravity of a black hole. "Communications coming in from Earth Defense Command," Sarah reported from her station. "They're demanding to know why we're returning 3 months ahead of schedule and why our ship's energy signature has changed. Tell them we have critical information requiring immediate briefing with the Colonial Council," ordered. "And prepare the quantum burst transmitter. We need to get our data to Earth ahead of our arrival." Moved to the science station and began encoding everything they had learned about the Devourers, the ancient being, and the transformation process. The information would seem impossible to anyone who hadn't witnessed what he had become, but they had to try to prepare humanity for what was coming. Dr. Martinez approached him quietly. "Have you thought about how you're going to identify potential candidates? We're talking about finding perhaps 11,000 people out of 11 billion. That's like finding specific grains of sand on a beach." "I've been thinking about that," replied, his fingers dancing across the control interface faster than human reflexes should allow. "The sensitivity I had to the ancient being's presence, it's linked to specific neural structures, quantum coherence patterns in the brain that allow for dimensional perception. We can scan for those patterns." "And then what? Walk up to random strangers and ask if they want to stop being human?" Paused in his work, the question hitting at the heart of his fears. "We tell them the truth. We show them what's coming, what the choice means, and let them decide for themselves. That's what makes us human, the ability to choose our own fate even when we don't fully understand the consequences." 3 days later, the Prometheus docked at Luna Station, the massive orbital facility that served as humanity's primary spaceport. Had requested that their debriefing be held in the station's most secure briefing room, with representatives from the Colonial Council, Earth Defense Command, and the Scientific Advisory Board in attendance. The presentation began with sensor data from their encounter with the Devourers. The assembled officials watched in stunned silence as displayed the gravitational anomalies, the energy signatures that known physics, and the calculated trajectory that would bring the entities to Earth in less than 5 months. "This is impossible," Director of the Science Advisory Board stated flatly. "Entities of this scale violate every law of thermodynamics we understand." "They exist outside our normal understanding of physics," explained patiently. "They're manifestations of consciousness that has transcended physical limitation, and they're coming whether we believe in them or not." General of Earth Defense Command leaned forward. "Assuming for the moment that this threat is real, what are our defense options? Can we mobilize the fleet to intercept them before they reach Earth?" "Conventional weapons would be useless," said. "These entities exist partially outside normal spacetime. Our ships would pass right through them while they consumed every conscious mind aboard." "Then what do you propose?" Councilwoman asked. Took a deep breath and began explaining the transformation process. He demonstrated his abilities by interfacing directly with the briefing room's computer systems, then by reaching his consciousness through the station's hull to describe the quantum-level structure of nearby asteroids. The room fell silent when he finished speaking. "You're asking us to authorize human experimentation on a scale never attempted before," Director said slowly. "And you're basing this on the word of an alien entity that could be lying to us." "The entity didn't lie to me," replied. "I can sense deception now across dimensional barriers. It told me the truth because our success serves its interests. It wants to see what happens when a species chooses evolution over extinction." "How do we know these Devourers aren't just a threat it created to manipulate us into transforming?" General demanded. Extended his consciousness toward Earth itself, feeling the planet's electromagnetic field and the patterns of life across its surface. But he also sensed something else, subtle distortions in local spacetime that indicated the approaching entities were already affecting the outer solar system. "Because they're already here," he said quietly. "The leading edge of their influence has reached Pluto's orbit. We have maybe 4 months before they arrive in force." The revelation sent a chill through the assembled officials. If the threat was real and immediate, they had no choice but to consider the proposed solution, no matter how impossible it seemed. Over the next week, worked with teams of scientists and psychologists to develop protocols for identifying and approaching potential transformation candidates. The neural scanning technology required to detect the necessary brain patterns was cutting-edge, but feasible using existing medical equipment. Dr. Sarah volunteered to be the first test subject, allowing to scan her neural patterns in detail. To his surprise and relief, she showed the sensitivity markers they were looking for. "I want to do it," she said after explained what the scan revealed. "I've seen what you've become. If there's a chance I can help save humanity, how can I refuse?" "Sarah, you need to understand what you're giving up. You'll outlive everyone you currently know and love. You'll see the universe in ways that will isolate you from normal human experience. The person you become will still be you, but you'll be forever changed. And if I don't do it, everyone dies anyway." The transformation took place in a specially prepared medical facility on Luna Station. Had synthesized a small amount of the blue essence using his understanding of its quantum structure, though he knew it would be far less potent than the original from the ancient being's world. Sarah lay on the medical table, surrounded by monitoring equipment and a team of doctors who could barely believe what they were witnessing. Held her hand as she drank the luminescent liquid. "If you drink this, you'll never be human again," he said, echoing the ancient being's warning. "I'm not just drinking this for me," Sarah replied. "I'm drinking it for everyone who can't make this choice." The transformation was less violent than it had been, perhaps because the synthesized essence was weaker, or because Sarah's consciousness was better prepared for what was happening. Even so, her vital signs spiked dramatically as her DNA rewrote itself, and her awareness expanded beyond normal human limitations. When she opened her eyes 12 hours later, they held the same subtle glow that's had acquired. She sat up slowly, her movements carrying a fluid grace that spoke of enhanced physical capabilities. "I can see everything," she whispered in wonder. "The quantum foam, the gravitational waves, the consciousness fields around every living thing. It's beautiful and terrible at the same time." Smiled, feeling less alone for the first time since his own transformation. Welcome to the first step of humanity's evolution. Over the following weeks, the identification and transformation process accelerated. The team established screening centers in major population areas, using cover stories about experimental neural research to avoid panic. Those who showed the necessary sensitivity markers were approached carefully, given full disclosure about the situation, and offered the choice. Not everyone who could transform chose to do so. Some couldn't bring themselves to abandon their current form of existence, even to save their species. Others were prevented by family obligations or religious convictions. But for every person who declined, 2 others stepped forward, drawn by a combination of scientific curiosity and selfless determination to protect their world. Found that the transformed humans could communicate through quantum-entangled consciousness, creating a growing network of enhanced awareness that spanned the globe. Each new addition to their number strengthened their collective ability to perceive and interact with reality on multiple dimensional levels. By the end of the first month, they had successfully transformed nearly 3,000 individuals. The network they formed could begin to sense the approaching devourers more clearly, confirming worst fears about the entity's hunger and determination. "They're not just predators," Sarah reported during one of their consciousness-sharing sessions. "They're gardeners of a sort, culling consciousness from the universe to prevent it from evolving beyond their ability to control." "Then they've picked the wrong species to cull," replied Dr. James Wright, a neuroscientist who had been among the first to volunteer for transformation. "Humans have never responded well to being told we can't evolve." But as their numbers grew, so did the challenges they faced. Transformed humans began reporting difficulties maintaining emotional connections with unchanged family members and friends. The gap between their enhanced perception and normal human awareness was vast, making communication increasingly difficult. Some of the transformed individuals began advocating for forcibly changing larger numbers of humans, arguing that time was running short, and the choice should be made for those too limited to understand its necessity. Found himself in the position of restraining his own people from the very behavior that would justify the devourer's actions. "We protect humanity's right to choose," he insisted during a heated debate among the transformed. "The moment we start forcing evolution on unwilling people, we become just another form of predator." "But if they don't choose quickly enough, everyone dies," argued Dr. Lisa Park, a former astronomer whose transformation had given her the ability to perceive cosmic structures across multiple galaxies. "Then we find another way," replied firmly. "That's what humans do. We find solutions that seem impossible until we make them work." The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Wright discovered that the consciousness network formed by transformed humans could extend protective fields around unchanged individuals, creating pockets of shielded awareness that the devourers couldn't easily penetrate. "We can't protect the entire planet with 3,000 people," he reported, "but we might be able to protect major population centers while we continue the transformation process." Felt hope stirring for the first time in weeks. How many more would we need to shield all of Earth? Conservative estimate: around 50,000 transformed individuals strategically positioned around the globe. But that assumes the devourers don't adapt their feeding methods to counter our defenses. 50,000 in 3 months, from a pool of perhaps 11,000 potential candidates worldwide. The mathematics were daunting, but had learned never to underestimate human determination when survival was at stake. As the devourers drew closer to Earth, their influence began affecting the planet's electromagnetic field. Aurora displays appeared at latitudes where they had never been seen before. Animals began exhibiting strange behaviors, as if sensing an approaching predator too vast to comprehend. The time for preparation was running out. Soon, humanity would face its greatest test, not just of their ability to evolve, but of their willingness to remain human while transcending the limitations that defined their species. In the depths of space, ancient hunger approached a blue world whose inhabitants refused to accept that evolution required abandoning one's essential nature. The devourers had consumed countless civilizations, but they had never faced a species that could transform while retaining the very bonds of loyalty and sacrifice that made them worth saving. The final confrontation was approaching, and no longer entirely human but still fundamentally shaped by human values, prepared to lead his people in their most impossible victory yet. The devourers arrived at Earth's solar system like a plague of living darkness, their presence warping space-time itself. From Luna Station's observation deck, watched through enhanced senses as reality bent around the ancient entities. They weren't ships or creatures in any conventional sense. They were manifestations of pure hunger given form, consciousness so old and vast that it had forgotten its origins. 3 months of desperate preparation had yielded remarkable results. The network of transformed humans now numbered nearly 40,000 individuals spread across every continent. Each one served as a node in an interconnected web of consciousness that could perceive and interact with reality on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. But it wasn't enough. Even with their enhanced numbers, they couldn't generate a planetary shield strong enough to completely protect Earth's 11 billion unchanged humans from entities that fed on consciousness itself. "They're establishing a perimeter around the outer planets," reported Dr. Sarah from the Primary Coordination Center in Geneva. Her voice carried the harmonic overtones that marked all transformed humans, but underneath was the strain of someone pushed to the limits of even enhanced endurance. "They're not rushing in. They're being methodical, cutting off escape routes before they begin feeding." Stood at the center of Luna Station's command center, his consciousness linked to the global network of transformed humans. Through 40,000 sets of enhanced senses, he could perceive the devourer's strategy with terrifying clarity. They had done this countless times before across the galaxy, refining their approach with each consumed civilization. "Status report from the surface," he requested. Dr. Wright's mental voice carried data from Earth's major population centers. "Shield generators are active in 237 cities worldwide. We're maintaining protective fields around approximately 4 billion people, but the energy drain is enormous. At current consumption rates, We'll burn out half our people within 72 hours. The cruel mathematics of their situation pressed down on like the weight of a dying star. They could save some of humanity, but not all. 7 billion people would remain exposed to the devourer's hunger, their consciousness harvested to feed entities that had existed since before Earth's sun was born. Unless they could find another way. Captain's voice cut through the quantum chatter of the network. The aging spacer had refused transformation, claiming that someone needed to represent unchanged humanity in their leadership structure. I'm getting reports of something happening near Jupiter. The devourers aren't just positioning themselves, they're doing something to the planet itself. Extended his awareness toward Jupiter and felt his transformed consciousness recoil in horror. The gas giant was being converted into some kind of consciousness amplification device. Its massive gravitational field twisted to focus and concentrate the psychic energy that would be harvested from Earth's population. They're not just going to feed on us, he realized, his voice carrying across the global network. They're going to turn our world into a processing plant for consciousness. Every human they consume will be converted into energy to power their expansion to other star systems. The implications hit the transformed network like a psychic shockwave. Earth wouldn't just lose its population, it would become a base of operations for the devourers to spread their hunger throughout the galaxy. Countless other worlds would suffer the same fate. New contact, Doctor's voice carried sudden urgency. Something's approaching from the direction of 442b. It's familiar. Felt his heart leap as he recognized the quantum signature. The ancient being that had offered him transformation was approaching Earth, moving through folded space at velocities that bent the laws of physics around it. The entity materialized in the command center without triggering any alarms, its crystalline form shifting to accommodate the station's artificial gravity. But something was different. Its usual serene demeanor had been replaced by what could only be described as alarm. You have done better than I dared hope. The being's mental voice carried notes of both pride and regret. 40,000 transformed in such a short time, maintaining protection over billions while retaining their essential humanity. But it will not be enough. I know, replied. What we don't know is how to do better. Can you help us? Perhaps, but the cost will be greater than you imagine. The devourers have made a critical error in their approach to your world. They have underestimated humanity's capacity for sacrifice. Explain. The being gestured, and suddenly the command center filled with holographic displays showing the quantum structure of the approaching entities. The devourers are not truly immortal. They sustain themselves by consuming consciousness, but they are vulnerable during the feeding process. For the brief moments when they are absorbing psychic energy, their own consciousness becomes accessible. Studied the patterns, his enhanced mind immediately grasping the implications. We can attack them while they're feeding, but that would require. It would require offering them a feast too tempting to resist. A massive concentration of transformed consciousness, linked together and broadcasting on frequencies they cannot ignore. A trap, Dr. Wright's voice carried grim understanding across the network. We'd be using ourselves as bait. More than that, to generate enough psychic energy to draw all the devourers into a single feeding frenzy, you would need to link not just the 40,000 transformed humans, but every conscious mind on Earth. All 11 billion of your species, joined in a single moment of unified awareness. The audacity of the plan was staggering. Link the consciousness of every human being on the planet, using the transformed individuals as conductors to create a psychic signal so powerful it would overwhelm the devourer's hunting instincts. What happens to the unchanged humans? Sarah asked. Forcing that kind of consciousness link could kill them. Some would not survive the experience, the being admitted. Perhaps 1 in 10,000 would perish from the neural strain, but those who survived would be different. Not transformed as you are, but enhanced, elevated. The entire species would take its next evolutionary step simultaneously. And the devourers? In their feeding frenzy, they would become vulnerable. Your linked consciousness could turn their own hunger against them, forcing them to consume each other instead of your people. It has never been attempted before, but your species has already achieved the impossible simply by maintaining its unity while transcending its limitations. Felt the weight of decisions settling on his shoulders. They were talking about forcibly evolving the entire human race. gambling with billions of lives on a plan that had never been tested against entities that had conquered countless other worlds. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "The Devourers have completed their preparations around Jupiter. They will begin their assault on Earth within 6 hours. If you are going to act, it must be soon." Opened a channel to the entire global network, sharing the ancient being's proposal with all 40,000 transformed humans simultaneously. The response was immediate and overwhelming, a collective recognition that this was their only chance to save not just their world, but potentially the galaxy itself. But it was Captain who asked the question that cut to the heart of their dilemma. What gives us the right to make this choice for 11 billion people? The command center fell silent as the question hung in the air. The transformed humans could force the consciousness link, could drag the entire species through evolution whether they wanted it or not. But doing so would violate everything that made humanity worth saving. "We don't have that right," said finally, "which is why we're going to ask for volunteers." "There isn't time," Dr. Park protested. "We can't get informed consent from 11 billion people in 6 hours." "We don't need informed consent from everyone. We need it from enough people to create a critical mass for the consciousness link. If we can get 1 billion humans to voluntarily join the network, the quantum resonance will naturally draw in the others, but gently, without forcing the evolution on anyone." "That is theoretically possible," the ancient being admitted. "But how will you convince 1 billion humans to trust in something they cannot understand?" Smiled, feeling the same determination that had driven humanity to the stars despite every obstacle the universe had placed in their path. "We tell them the truth. We show them what's at stake, and we trust in the one thing that has always defined our species. When faced with extinction, humans choose to fight." The next 4 hours were the most intense in human history. Using every communication network on Earth, the transformed humans broadcast a message that reached every conscious mind on the planet simultaneously. They showed the approaching Devourers, explained the nature of the threat, and outlined the plan to turn the entity's hunger against them. But they also made clear what participation would cost: the risk of death, the certainty of change, and the responsibility that would come with humanity's next evolutionary step. The response was everything it hoped for and more. Instead of panic or denial, humanity responded with characteristic stubbornness. If ancient entities wanted to harvest their consciousness, they would discover that humans had never been easy prey. Volunteers flooded the network faster than the transformed individuals could process them. Parents volunteered to protect their children's future. Scientists volunteered to ensure knowledge would survive. Ordinary people volunteered because they refused to let their world die without a fight. By the time the Devourers began their assault on Earth's atmosphere, 1.7 billion humans had voluntarily joined the consciousness network. The psychic energy generated by their unified awareness was visible from space as aurora-like patterns that danced across the planet's electromagnetic field. The Devourers took the bait. They abandoned their careful positioning and dove toward Earth like predators sensing wounded prey. In their hunger to consume the massive psychic signal, they opened their own consciousness to absorb the expected feast. That was when humanity struck back. Led by the 40,000 transformed humans, the linked consciousness of nearly 2 billion people reached into the Devourer's awareness and found the quantum structures that had sustained the ancient entities for millions of years. Instead of offering themselves for consumption, the human network began dismantling the entities from within. The battle took place on levels of reality that had no names, in dimensions where thought became force and will became weapon. The Devourers fought back with the experience of eons, but they had never encountered a consciousness that could think collectively while maintaining individual identity. Humanity's greatest strength, the ability to work together without losing personal autonomy, became their salvation. The Devourers, accustomed to consuming isolated minds, couldn't adapt to a prey species that became stronger through unity rather than weaker. One by one, the ancient entities began to collapse as their own hunger was turned against them. Their consciousness scattered across dimensional space, their power broken by a species that refused to accept that evolution required abandoning one's essential nature. When the battle ended, Earth hung in space, surrounded by the dissipating energy signatures of entities that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. The devourers were gone, destroyed by their own appetites when faced with a consciousness that could not be consumed. But the victory came with a price. The 1.7 billion humans who had joined the network were forever changed. Not transformed as had been, but enhanced, elevated to a new level of awareness that bridged the gap between normal humanity and transcended consciousness. Standing in Luna Station's observation deck, looked down at a world that glowed with new patterns of life and thought. Humanity had taken its next evolutionary step, but had done so while remaining fundamentally human. "You have achieved something I have never seen in my eons of existence," the ancient being said, its form beginning to fade as it prepared to return to whatever realm it called home. "You have proven that transcendence does not require abandonment of one's origins." "What happens now?" asked. "Now you explore what it means to be human in a universe where consciousness is not limited by the boundaries you once accepted. You have become guardians not just of your own world, but of any species that seeks to evolve without losing itself." As the entity disappeared, felt a profound sense of completion. The choice he had made on 442B had led to this moment, not just his own transformation, but the elevation of his entire species to something greater. He was no longer the only human who had drunk from the cup of transcendence. Now he was part of something larger, a species that had proven that evolution and humanity were not mutually exclusive concepts. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity was ready to explore it all while remaining true to the bonds that had always defined them. They would not abandon their own, not ever. And that, realized, was what made them dangerous to any force that threatened the cosmos. Humanity had become something new, but they had remained essentially themselves. The galaxy would never be the same,